Hi, I'm Braddock District Supervisor James Walkinshaw. Thanks for tuning in to Braddock Voices, a regular podcast where we talk to Braddock District and Fairfax County residents and leaders who are working to make our wonderful community even better. To stay up to date with future episodes, community news, and local events, make sure to sign up for the Braddock District email list by emailing us at braddock@fairfaxcounty.gov, or just give my office a call at 703-425-9300 to subscribe. As we continue the fight against COVID-19, please keep wearing your face covering, continue washing your hands often, and practice social distancing. And before we get into the show and introductions of our amazing guests, I want to start with a segment that we hope to make a regular part of the show, and that is our four-legged friend spotlight, where each episode we will be dedicating a segment to making sure that our four-legged friends at the Fairfax Animal Shelter become new family members at a loving and safe home. And today I'm happy to introduce our first Braddock Voices four-legged friend, Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown is a handsome boxer breed with a brindle and white-collared coat. He's just over 1 year old and is medium-sized, around 60 pounds. Charlie's quite young and has been incredibly friendly with the animal shelter staff from the get-go. He's still in the puppy phase of being a little bit jumpy, so walking on a leash is difficult, but it's only because he's so excited about the world and curious about his surroundings. His playful and exuberant personality would be best paired with patient owners who are willing to train him and help him reach his full potential. In short, Charlie Brown is an energetic, friendly, untrained diamond in the rough. With a little polishing, he'll be someone's best friend forever. If you're interested in meeting Charlie Brown, you can call my office at 703-425-9300 or email us at braddock@fairfaxcounty.gov and we'll connect you with the animal shelter. Or you can call them directly at 703-830-1100 to request a meeting with Charlie directly. If Charlie's already found a new home by the time you call, don't worry, the animal shelter can help you find your future best friend. With that, it's my honor to introduce our two incredible guests that we have today. Former Chairman of the Board of Supervisors and Braddock and Annandale District Supervisor, Sharon Bulova. Sharon became the Annandale District Supervisor in 1987. She served in that position until 2009 when she was elected Chairman of the Board of Supervisors until 2019. Sharon served in every possible regional capacity. She chaired the board's budget committee for many years. She led the county through the difficult years of the Great Recession. And she's widely recognized as the mother of the Virginia Railway Express. We're also very fortunate to have former Braddock District Supervisor John Cook. John was elected Braddock District Supervisor in a special election in 2009 and served until 2019. He served in leadership roles on the VRE Operations Board, the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, the Northern Virginia Regional Commission. He chaired the board's Public Safety Committee and helped lead efforts to improve the Fairfax County Police Department and develop the award-winning Diversion First program. So Sharon and John, welcome to the Braddock Voices podcast. You all are the first guests. We decided to go big with the first episode. We weren't going to ease into it. We got the two heaviest hitters that we could get, and I think we have I know that we have all three living Braddock District Supervisors in one location here, so there's no designated survivor.
Not quite the president.
Yeah,
but,
if anything happens, that's it. We're all wiped out at once. Well, let's get into the conversation. I'll open it up and just ask you to start, Sharon. Tell us your story. Tell us where you grew up, your professional background, and what led you to run for supervisor in the first place.
Okay, well, I'll try to do this briefly.
Yeah.
So I'm originally from Baltimore County, and moved into Fairfax County when I was 18, a young bride. And I never thought that I would run for office.
Now, let me stop you there. Now, there is a famous photo of you. Tell us about the famous photo of you as a young girl. This was in Baltimore, right?
This was in Baltimore.
Okay, tell us about that photo.
There's one of my favorite framed photos is a photo of John F. Kennedy sitting in a chair with a window behind him, and he's going over a speech before giving an address as a fundraising dinner. And it was at the Baltimore Armory, or the Pikesville Armory. And there's a crowd of people in the window behind him, including me.
So you're outside.
I'm outside
and
looking in,
okay.
and John F. Kennedy was my hero. So
before that photo, he was your hero.
I was a huge fan, and our family knew that he was coming to the Armory to give a speech, and so we went to the Armory along with a lot of other people, and saw him go into a little I guess it was a little room or a little house near the Armory, and most of the other people left, but my dad, my sister, and I, and a few other people went looking in windows so we could see him, and we were looking in one window, and across from us a door opened, and son of a gun, there was John F. Kennedy, and he was surrounded by staff, but also press.
Yeah.
And so he saw the window, and he went over, put his hand up, smiled. We were like so impressed. And then he sat down. The picture that was taken, or there were pictures, were in the Baltimore Sun and also in Life magazine. And so that was like the highlight of my young life.
So did you didn't know about the picture until you saw Life magazine, or how?
So I saw the picture in the Baltimore Sun the next morning.
Okay. Wow.
And then it was, I guess, about a week or so later that I saw the picture.
You were in the right
magazine.
place at the right time, which
I was definitely, yes.
The key to success, I suppose.
And actually, so that kind of was my inspiration to become interested in government, in politics. Never, ever thought that I would run for office.
So fast forward to that. You moved to Fairfax County and
a common thread. John has, I think, the same experience. I got involved with my civic association, so Kings Park West, and it's not hard to work yourself up into a leadership role.
Small room, many positions.
If you have a pulse.
If you're willing to show up, yeah.
If you have a pulse, and volunteers. I'm making a joke, but bless their hearts, people who become involved, with the civic association. You, James, came up the same way. Really, you became involved with Ravensworth Farm.
That's right. Yeah.
And people will call their civic association president before they call anybody else when there's a problem in the community, any time of the day or night. And I kind of loved that. I liked being able to help people, and I thought it was just a good feeling, being in a leadership role in the community and helping to make the community better. Yeah. It was pretty exciting. Yeah,
one of the things that I appreciate about the neighborhood and civic association work, and at least in my experience, I had been the chief of staff for Congressman Connolly, so people saw me in a certain light, maybe people from the other side of the political aisle. But in the neighborhood and civic association context, we could sit down across the table in the cafeteria of the elementary school and work together to try to solve problems and make the neighborhood a little bit different. And I think it's really valuable, and especially these days, for us as a community to have those experiences where we have to see people maybe outside of the partisan and political context or box that we might put them in, and realize maybe we have more in common than not that we don't have differences, but maybe we have more in common than we thought we did.
There's so much division in the world and in the United States today. Where you can really make a difference is in local government. especially on the district level. You know, these are your neighbors, and being able to talk through differences, being able to iron out issues and problems that arise in the community. You can do that on the local level. It really is a wonderful, just a fantastic level of government.
And so tell us about your decision to run. So you're doing the neighborhood and civic association work in Kings Park West, and then what happened?
So that was actually a very scary experience. So I, first of all, I sort of stumbled into being president of the association. And I explained, you know, that I didn't like speaking in public, and I couldn't run a meeting. I didn't know how you did that. I didn't know anything about Robert's Rules of Order. To make a long story short, I became vice president of the association, and then felt comfortable that the president was this charismatic guy who was teaching you know, me and the rest of his board, you know, how we were going to do some great things for the community. And at the very night that we had, you know, the swearing in for new officers, he let me know that he had just gotten orders to go to Korea.
Wow.
And that I would therefore become the acting president of the association. And I thought my life was over.
There was no Zoom at that point. He couldn't do it virtually from Korea. Yeah.
But that led me to work closely with Audrey Moore, who was at the time it was the Annandale District, and she helped us work through a road project and a land use issue, and I really admired the way she got the community together and the way she was able to get, you know, county staff and expertise together to work through problems and issues with us. She then decided after a bit that, or actually, she invited me to come and work for her as her aide, and so I quit the job that I had, went and worked for her as her aide. About 3 years later, she decided to run for chairman of the Board of Supervisors. And she encouraged me to run for her seat. And then I had a rerun of the other experience. I can't speak in public. I don't know how to run, you know, a meeting. I don't know, you know, how to do this or that. And but she encouraged me, and I decided that I really wanted to do that. I loved the way she governed. And she was my role model. She wasn't a perfect chairman when she wound up being chairman. That was not her forte, because she was kind of a maverick. But as a district supervisor, she was wonderful.
An advocate, a real advocate.
She was a fantastic advocate for her district.
Well, I think I told you this story, but when I was thinking about running, I went back and read all the old articles about Sharon's early campaigns, and there was one article from 1987, and it noted that over the course of that first campaign that she went out and knocked on 16,000 doors, and I think you had children at that point. David certainly would have been born, and so you know, I said to myself, well, you know, if Sharon Bulova in 1987 can knock on 16,000 doors.
It was 14. So that's
well, yeah. Here's the article says 16. So I had that in my head, and I went out over the course of the year, and I made it to 15,000. I didn't get to 16,000, and then when I saw Sharon on the night of the election, I said, I tried to match that 16,000 doors that you knocked on, and she says, oh, it wasn't really 16, it was only 14. So I was killing myself all year to try to keep up with the 1987 Sharon Bulova, and I came up short. So why don't we, John, let's turn it to you. Tell us your story, where you grew up, where you came from, and what led you to run for supervisor.
So I grew up in upstate New York in a small town, and I was in a political house because my dad was in office, and so it was just something I was always interested in. And
What kind of office did he serve?
he was in the state senate in New York for a number of years, and so on one hand, I kind of always thought, someday maybe I'd like to be in some sort of office. But on the other hand, I had seen the other side of it, and I never wanted to be sort of stuck. I didn't want to be a career elected official because I saw what it could do. The pressure you get under when, your job, your family is on the line. And so I always, and that's part of the reason why I kept my day job when I was on the board. So I came to this area to go to law school at George Washington, always assuming I would go back, as about half the people around here didn't. Nobody ever expects to stay, and you end up staying because it's a great place to live. And I met my wife, who grew up in Arlington, and we just never left. We moved to Fairfax in 1998, moved to Kings Park, bought a house, had kids, started to do all that kind of stuff. And I was really not thinking about running for office, was not particularly involved in the community. But as my kids started to get to be school aged, I thought, it's time. It was a little established, my law practice. And I get a call from our Civic Association president, and he said, hey, I need a legal advisor for the Civic Association. Would you do it? And I said, I'd be happy to. It's not in my area of law. I really don't know anything about it. He said, I just need your name in the newsletter. You don't even have to show up for the meetings.
That's what they always say.
Right? And I said, okay, But then, and then I thought, well, maybe I ought to show up and go to some meetings. And so I did start to go. And you start to talk to people. And there was a good group we had in Kings Park, and we would chat. And one person I became pretty close to, somebody Sharon knows, Ken Malmberg, and we would talk. And one day, we're digging through some old files, doing some cleanup, and Ken says, you're going to be the next president of the Civic Association. I said, really? He said, oh yeah, we've all talked and we've decided. I'm thinking, who's we? Right. But I said, okay. He said, look, you know this stuff. You'll be great. And I said, well, thanks. And so. That election was a lot easier than some of my other ones.
Right, so, that's the way to do it.
Right, you just kind of slide in. Yeah. And then I really had sort of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that Sharon, as the district supervisor, launched this community revitalization effort and invited a number of us neighborhood leaders to come together and gave us a tutorial that was incredible on how the county runs and public policy and local government. And then she said, at the end of several of these meetings, she said, I'd like one of you to volunteer to kind of put together a pilot program. And so we can do the stuff we've been talking about. There were zoning issues and issues of neighborhoods turning over and different racial and ethnic backgrounds and neighborhoods and detentions that was causing. And I went home that night. I said, I can do this. And I threw together some thoughts, which was sort of a compilation of the things Sharon had put in front of us. And I think I shot her an email the next day. I said, you mean something like this? And I'll remember your response. She said, you nailed it. And I said, okay. And so really had a great opportunity to work with Sharon and with people in the county on that effort. And so somewhere along the line there, I thought, maybe local. I really had not thought about serving in local government in any capacity.
That kind of showed you what it can do.
Yeah. And I found, because I didn't think I was interested in local government, and I did that, and I found this is really neat. So it was really interesting. And then, we're all political folks. Then at that time, everyone saw these dominoes coming because John Warner was going to retire, and Tom Davis was going to move up, and Jerry and Sharon. So somewhere along the line, I thought, well, maybe I'll give it a shot. And, that was it.
All right. Great. Well, let's move on, and I'm going to ask both of you to share with us your best moment in the job and your worst. And I'll take the prerogative, the incumbent's prerogative, and I'll only share my best. When I retire many years from now, I'll share my worst. But for me, the best moment so far, and it seems like a small thing, but you both can probably appreciate it, This is before the pandemic. We have been working to get another purple can for glass recycling for the listeners and viewers. Fairfax County has a purple can glass recycling program, whereas you can't put your glass curbside anymore. You can put it in the purple can, and we recycle it locally. Hugely successful program, but we hadn't had one at Wakefield Park. And both of you probably know for many years there had been recycling at Wakefield Park, and it was removed because it wasn't quite working out. But there was kind of a hole there, and when I got elected, we had been looking at where do we need another purple can, and I went to a meeting of the North Springfield Civic Association, which is almost my neighbors, but not quite. And as I was walking in, this is before the pandemic, one of the moms pulls me aside and says, we really sorry, we should have given you a heads up, but we have the Girl Scout troop here, and they've prepared a petition for you that they want a purple can glass recycling bin placed at Wakefield Park. They've done their own analysis. I had this was independent of the work we had been doing on it. They did their own analysis and looked at the county and surveyed the neighborhood, and there's need for the purple can there, and they're going to present you with a petition. So all the Girl Scouts come up and give the petition that they had spent a lot of time developing and working on and show me. And now I'm on the spot in front of the Civic Association. The Girl Scouts have just asked, so the only thing I can do is say, absolutely, we're going to get that purple can. It might take a little bit longer than we like, but we're gonna get it there. And coincidentally, when I went back to the office the next day, there was one free purple can floating around the county that we were able to get placed at Wakefield Park. So I dodged a bullet. The Girl Scouts would have been probably disappointed, but we were able to do it, and it shows, those kind of small things. Maybe it might seem small to some, but for those Girl Scouts and for the folks in that community, it makes a big difference. And there aren't that many jobs, even in politics. And I've been around politics a little bit. There aren't that many jobs where you can do that kind of tangible thing that really has an impact for people. So that's been my best moment so far. Sharon, how about you?
So I have lots of best moments, but as the Braddock supervisor, I think the highlight of my time was when we cut the ribbon for the Burke Center VRE garage. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole little story. You could write a little novel about leading up to this garage. Originally it was a just surface parking lot, and it was wildly popular. So it was relatively early in the life of the VRE, and so this was a really popular station, and people were parking all over the place and creatively creating their own parking spaces on hills, and then getting in and out when the train came in was a kind of a disaster. And so we knew that a parking garage was the answer. And so county staff put together a artist rendering and plans for the Burke VRE garage parking facility, and so I hosted a meeting, the place was packed. It was in, I think it was maybe Bonnie Bray Elementary School cafeteria, and we had all the artist renderings, all over the room, and so I stood up and talked a little bit about, the timing and how much it was going to cost, and, how, this was going to happen. And I looked out into the audience, and I saw a sea of...
Not the response you're hoping for.
We don't like it. We're going to kill it.
I've seen that.
Yes, anybody who's, especially in local government. Anyway, people in the audience started plotting how they were going to kill the plans for the VRE garage. And I put together a task force because the garage was important. And so I thought, well, let's have people become engaged in So what's wrong with it? Well, they didn't like the way it looked. It looked too industrial. It was too big. It was going to become a magnet for people all over, all over the community, or not community, but Prince William County.
Right. Those people from Prince William
would come. And so the task force really broke down, all of the things that caused people to resist the garage. In the end, it was a much more attractive parking facility. It was really a nice-looking facility, and the neighborhood had helped. It was Burke Center, but also other neighborhoods around it had helped with the design. They had also helped build, have plans for building trails so that people could walk and bike to the garage, and they wouldn't have to drive their cars or to the station.
Right.
When we finally, this was their parking facility. So it sounds kind of silly, but I mean, we got emotional over this parking facility. And when we cut the ribbon, the community turned out, big time. And we had a great crowd there. And when we cut the ribbon, the VRE staff had arranged to have a cannon full of confetti shoot confetti out of the top of the garage. And they pulled down a banner that said, "Thank you, Burke Center," and that was like the best.
Great story.
It was the best. It wasn't just that we had built a parking facility, but we had really engaged the community. We brought people together, and
it started as something that maybe could have been a negative outcome for experience.
Yes, it definitely could have been a negative, and it was. It probably would have been a negative if we had just forced it through, and built something that people hated and didn't think was appropriate.
And how about your worst or most difficult moment or experience?
In the same area, it was Roberts Road, which is the road that goes past the VRE station, and. When Roberts Road Roberts Road is a very old road. It's been on the maps forever, but it's interrupted as it goes through, or it was interrupted as it went through Kings Park West. And so there was a missing segment, and we always knew that we would come back and we would complete that missing segment. When it came time to do that, the community went nuts. They did not want to complete the missing segment, but it was really important because it was a major way of being able to get from the city of Fairfax, into Burke and beyond. Right. And so anyway, I tried to do what I do, and that is get people together and blah blah blah. Yeah. But it was just something people did not want. We redesigned the road in many ways to make it not as large a segment as it was originally. People were afraid that it would become a major thoroughfare, and so we did some things to modify the design, but I think the worst moment as the Braddock supervisor was when we did a walkthrough of the project, knocked on people's doors, had them come out, take a look at the plans, so that we could save trees here and there. We could do different things to to try to make the design friendlier, and but people were just too angry. Yeah. And unfortunately. But it had to happen, in my mind, and it was an important transportation project.
John, best and worst?
We do get our hands in so many things, and I don't know if I have specific events, but certainly Lake Akatink, saving Lake Akatink, and helping start Diversion First and others were highlights of my career. If there was one event, it was my special election. Because it was unexpected by most people. Only a few people thought I had any chance at all. And it really kind of was earth-shattering, and that was really an amazing moment to do and just see a lot of things come together. Certainly something I'll always remember. But substantively, working on Diversion First, which had a long story, and Sharon, I'm sure, will want to talk about it too, because she had a tremendous role in that. From my standpoint, I had been actually I had taken a class in D.C. Superior Court in about 2013 as part of being a mediator in the courts, and it was about post-traumatic stress in returning veterans and how and just what symptomology there is in helping to mediate cases with people involved. And I learned a lot about those conditions. And so when the idea of the Veterans Treatment Docket came up here in Fairfax, I jumped in and said I wanted to help do that. And out of that, learned about some of these issues. And then my administrative assistant, Lindsay Smith, said to me one day, I'd like you to meet with somebody from my church. And I said, sure, who is it? And a guy by the name of Pete Early, who has written a book about his son's issues with the criminal justice system. His son was bipolar, and the book is called Crazy. It's a national bestseller. And so I met with Pete, and we had a great talk, and he gave me a copy of his book. And I took it home and read it over Christmas. I think this was probably 2014, and I just said, we're gonna do this. And I remember getting up and sending my staff, my chief of staff, an email. I said, I'm reading Pete's book. You got to read it, and we're going to fix it. Didn't know how, didn't have a plan, but I said, we're going to fix this. And so when that opportunity came up, unfortunately, some bad things happened here in the county, and we had McKenna, and so when John Gear, and when Sharon announced that she was putting together her task force on police use of force. And she said, so if people want to support, if you have ideas, let me know. And I said, would you add a segment on mental health? And I said, if you will, I will support your effort. So it was, and that's part of what you have to do to, to get in, to get things done. You give, you get, and I was supportive of police reform anyway. And Sharon graciously said, yeah, let's put it in there. And then a lot of people got involved, and Sheriff Kincaid and Tisha Deegan at CSB, and then Sharon, and Sharon really pushed that through. And we've built a heck of a program here. Probably the substantive legacy that I've been able to be part of.
And worst moment, most difficult moment.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's an easy one, and not a good story. But going back to community meetings, it was actually 2 community meetings for the One University project. Which
I was there. I remember.
Yeah, affordable housing project, a necessary project, and I still believe a very good project next to George Mason, and the anger that people had, and the racial undertones, which angered me. And after all we've seen this year, it's here too, and it's not just a partisan thing, because there were plenty of people in the room of both political parties. But it was NIMBY plus, and really that sense of, especially when it came to schools and people saying, you're going to destroy the schools. And I'm doing the math, and I'm saying there's not enough people. We're not going to add enough kids to have. It'll have a small impact like any development was, but we're not going to destroy the schools, because what people are really saying is, I don't want poor minority kids in school with my kids, and I really was offended by that. Very difficult meetings. People said some very mean things. It was hard. Some people said to me, maybe you ought to just not do this project, and that was almost a challenge. And I said, no, I'm going to do it. But it was hard, and it was ugly, and it was not the side of the community that we like to see. And Sharon and I have both done so many things, and you too, James. You want the community active, and there's so many positives. in our community. Great people in this county do great things, but another side came out at those meetings, and it wasn't good.
So that's a good lead into a question that I wanted to ask both of you, or maybe a set of questions, which was, what was your process for making those difficult decisions, and how did you handle and work through a situation where you really felt that it was the right thing to do X, and maybe there was a vocal group, maybe even a majority, felt you should do Y or that you should not do X? And I think, the kind of trite thing to say is, you should just always do what's right and what's in your heart and what you believe to be right, which is true. But where is that line between you're doing what's right and ensuring that you're listening to people and listening to the community, and how do you gauge which side of that line you're in? And that's something I think about myself, because even right now I can, there are a handful of decisions that I'm going to be faced with maybe over the next year even, where my sense is I'll get a lot of pushback if I maybe go in the direction that I probably think is the right thing long term for the community. So how did you think through those situations and come to a decision that you could live with? And John, we'll start with you since you led us in this direction.
I think one thing you have to do is realize that maybe you don't know what the right thing to do is at the beginning, and you have to have a little humility to be willing to listen to people. Braddock Road Project was a great example of that. I thought we had a pretty good plan in the beginning, and it actually came out of a task force Sharon had put together 10 years earlier. But the community was not in favor, and I think because it was hard to really get across what we were trying to do. But through a series of meetings and then a task force and a lot of effort, and you start to listen, and then we evolved the project. We changed the project to respond to some good concerns, and we went back to the engineers and said, hey, what is the answer to this question? And then they'd come back and we found something. This isn't going to work. We need to do this. And just rolling with that, and ended up, I think, with a very good project, and I hope you get the money for it.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Because it's needed, and we needed to do project, but until we really got in and studied, and it was helpful to have the community input. Some really good concerns and ideas came forward, as they did with Lake Acatink, which was another example of taking some problems and having people, everyday people, stand up at a meeting and say, have you looked at this? And you go, that's a really good idea. And you start to dig through it, and then you put together something. But, you came to some of those meetings. You got to be willing to stand up there and say, look, we have to do this. And in my view, if you're not willing to do that, you don't belong on the job. And I'll go back to something I said earlier. I always really believed that you need to be willing to walk away. You need to be willing to say, this is kind of what I think I should do, and if it's going to cost me the job, then that's okay. And you do what you can do, and then be willing enough to leave so that you're not captive to it. The minute you sit there and you say, this is the right thing, but I need to do this to get elected, right. And if you can't merge those things in some way, then you're put into a bad conflict.
Sharon, so same question, and maybe Roberts Road is a good example, because it doesn't sound like there was much support at the time, but looking back on it,
looking back, it was the right thing to do. Never doubt the value of community engagement, and I've never had a situation where that hasn't improved the final product. And then not only has it improved the final product, but it's also improved the community, the way people, work with their local government and work with our local staff. It's just a better way to do things. I'm reminded of we have in Fairfax County, and especially in the Braddock District, a number of lakes that are actually stormwater detention facilities, and people love them, but they started silting in. And so county staff originally said, well, that's okay. For them. Lake Accotink actually is a much larger example of that. But these are smaller, so it's Lake, Royal Lake in Kings Park West, Lake Barton, the smaller lakes. And so finally, I pushed for, to get the lakes dredged. And
Lake Barton, we're about to start dredging
again. And you're about to do it.
Yeah.
Well, and of course, everybody wanted them dredged, but then when the actual project was going to happen, people wanted to be involved. And the involvement, of people in the design for a little public works project, really turned out to be extremely valuable. People were really fascinated with the function of these little dams and lakes, and they had ideas for how to stage the construction equipment, and how to get in and out. Some of the things that they were concerned about, trucks driving through the neighborhood, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Bringing the community together, letting people into your head in making a decision, turns out really to be a better way of doing things. So John just said, sometimes you think you know what the right thing is, and then you find out that there are all different ideas that people may have to put on the table, and that's extremely valuable, extremely helpful.
Yeah, Lake Accotink is a good example of John riding into the sunset at the right time, because I remember that meeting with John and now Chairman McKay, where they announced that they had come up with a financing plan to save Lake Accotink, and everyone cheered and clapped. And I can tell you the meetings that we've had since then, where we're going through the details of exactly how the mud will move from Lake Accotink to where it's ultimately going to go, have been a bigger challenge. So you got out at the right time on Lake Accotink.
But on that, the idea of pumping the mud up to the other side of Braddock Road was a citizen idea.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, when this started, we really thought that we were going to have the 1,000 trucks a day, and we were going to just have to find a way to live with that, and that was an uncomfortable thought. But funny and a little bit counter to what I said a couple minutes ago. Lake Accotink was one where, from day one, I was 100% totally clear we were going to keep that lake, and there had been some murmurs in the Park Authority for years about letting the lake fill in, and I had tried to sort of say, no, we're not going to do that. And Sharon and I had some talks, and then when the Park Authority kind of put that idea out, I felt I knew that the community wanted the lake. It wasn't what did John Cook want. It was I knew the community wanted that lake, and I said we're going to keep this lake, and so I immediately spoke up at that first meeting that the Park Authority put on, and then was called by your neighborhood, and people said, look, can you come down, and what do we need to do? And we had a great meeting, and I said, you got to put together an organization, you got to raise money, you need signs, and you need signatures, and then I knew that you don't do something big and good by yourself. And I went to Jeff McKay, and I said, I knew I needed a partner, and Jeff and I worked together pretty well, and he was right on board, and that way we could do it. And then when Brian Hill became county executive, and he was doing tours of the districts, which was something I had done with Ed Long when he was county executive. So we went to Lake Accotink, and we drove up top and parked, and I said, Brian, we're going for a walk. And we walked down the hill, and when it opens up, and we saw the lake, and I said, we're saving this lake. And he looked at me and said, I get it. So sometimes sometimes you need you need to have the knowledge and then the clarity of doing things. But I 100% agree with Sharon and really learned a lot from your example of working with the community and was never afraid to put something in front of the community and say, what do you think? And that doesn't mean you're always going to agree with every comment that comes up, and you have to make decisions, like with one university where many people didn't want it. But at least you know what people think, and you've given them the opportunity to speak out and give their view, and you've considered it. A lot of people just want to be heard, and they will accept an answer that maybe they don't like if they believe that they've had a chance to express a view and have input. And I've always really believed that that's an important part, certainly of local government.
So next, maybe a slightly more personal question, but in what ways would each of you say that you grew as a person over the course of your tenure? Skills that you had that you didn't start with, sensibilities that you had that you didn't start with, knowledge that you had that you didn't start with. We'll start with you, Sharon.
So I never wanted to be an elected official. Never thought I would ever be a politician. And yet I loved what I saw that you could do as a local government representative. And so I really wanted then to run and to, once I had gotten over the initial resistance, I walked to 14,000 doors. And so
not 16,000.
Not 16, but
okay.
14,000. And then I came back 4 years later and picked up
Yeah, I kept going.
about 6,000 more. But that was a real growth experience for me, where I was shy. I was a shy person. I didn't like speaking in public, but walking door to door, knocking on people's doors, having conversations. You know, I'm Sharon Bulova. I'm running for, the Annandale or Braddock District Supervisor, and hearing what people's concerns were. Come on to the backyard. I want to show you a drainage problem. And you.
I went to that house.
Yeah.
Yes, people loved it, that there was a real live elected official, on their porch, and if they could show you what needed to be fixed.
Yeah.
By the time I came through that experience running for office, I knew the community, and I was not afraid to stand up in front of a audience of people who I knew. This was my district, and so I became more confident, and speaking was not a problem. That's a hard phobia to get over, the phobia of speaking in public.
Yeah.
And but I'd say walking door to door, knocking on doors, and then campaigning and standing up in front of a civic association as their candidate. So
it's a very unnatural thing for most people. If you unless someone has been in door-to-door sales or run for office or worked a lot in campaigns, the idea that you just walk up to a stranger's door and knock on the door and ask them to vote for you. I mean, it's an unnatural thing.
It was like an epic journey. And so I was working for my predecessor, Audrey Moore, as her aide. She essentially kicked me out of her office. She said, "You've got to start walking door to door, and you can't be working in here. People will criticize you for, working in here and running for office. And anyway, you need to be walking door to door." And she said, "Sharon, if you knock on every
Audrey
door..."
doesn't strike me as someone who is shy about going out and knocking on people's doors. Yeah.
She said
that didn't bother her.
She said no, that didn't bother her at all.
Yeah.
But she said if you knock on every door in the district, of course, at the time that was 20,000. That's how many doors there were. And she said, that if people meet you and know you, they'll vote for you. And so I thought, well, I can do that. And so I would fix myself, a thermos full of water, and I'd have walking sheets that I took with me, and every day for hours and hours I would walk door to door, and that was sort of my baptism, by fire.
And
by the time I was
for you, that was overcoming some personal fears and
personal
phobias that
phobias
you had.
and I just became more confident and more sure of myself, and I felt that I knew my district.
John, how did you grow over the course of the job?
It's amazing. You do so many different things, and you're exposed to so many different issues, this broad range of things. And in one day, you go from somebody talking about a hole in their sidewalk to $1 billion transportation project to a budget issue to housing, and you just learn so much about the world and the community and how, it's unbelievable how much you don't know, and then you learn that there's always so much more to know. And so, I think you just grow from doing the job. And on the personal level, it's hard. and I had to learn kind of two things in opposite directions. On one hand, I'm a lawyer. I like to argue. I have a big mouth, and so one thing I had to learn was how to shut up and be careful of things that I would say, especially because I always had tight races, and I always knew politically I had to be careful. So I really had to train myself and discipline myself to think, before speaking and not pop off and do that kind of thing. But I also had some training as a mediator in the courts and things like that really helped me do that. But on the other hand, I've got a part of me that it's very hard to meet people that I don't know. I would go to, I remember going to some events like a Chamber of Commerce thing, and my fundraising consultant would say, okay, you come back with 10 cards. You open up a door with 500 strangers and say, John, go meet new people. It's the most terrifying thing I've ever done. It's not me. If I know people, I'm a backslapper and I love to talk to people and joke around. It's very hard to cold call up and just, kind of walk in and say, hi, I want to meet. You learn it, and after a while, just the fact that you're an elected official makes it a lot easier, I found, because you've got an excuse to talk to people, and then people actually want to talk to you, not because they like you, but because you're an elected official, so they figure they can get something out of it. But so that gets easier. You have to learn. And that can be hard. I'd be home and needing to run to the grocery store and thinking, okay, I got to put a clean shirt on. I better comb my hair. Now I can just, who cares? But
right.
You're always on, and you have to get used to that. And I did. I adapted to that, and I felt very comfortable after a while in that role of people know who I was, and it's actually nice this past summer in COVID, and walking around my neighborhood a lot because that's all you could do is go on walks, right? And people would stop the car and get out and say thank you, for your service, and stop me on the sidewalk and wave, and that was really neat. You can grow in a way of your interactions and your role in the community, but it's not easy. It's not easy, and it's not for the faint of heart. You have to kind of be motivated to do it. But someone told me once that I'm a cause-oriented person, and I think maybe there's something to that. And if I have a goal, I can motivate myself to do a lot of things, and so you can do things you didn't think you could do. When you stretch yourself, it's amazing how much you can do. And I think a lot of people out there learn that, and in different ways, people in the community do that every day. And not just in politics, but in whether it's community or nonprofits, schools, teachers, business people. And if there's any message, set a goal, and you can stretch yourself to meet that goal. We have that capacity to do it.
Yeah, we've, listening to both of you talk about your personal experiences, and I have to credit Jerry Connolly for this observation, although it doesn't apply to him because he's probably more of an extrovert. But people assume that everyone in politics is a backslapping extrovert, like Bill Clinton, right? It was to the extreme. But in truth, if you start actually looking, there are a lot more folks who have more introverted tendencies and qualities, and have kind of, trained themselves and figure out a way to overcome it. I think I probably would be in that category also, like both of you. So we're running up on time, so we have just a couple of more questions. This one is really just a selfish question for my own personal benefit, but I wanted to ask, both of you served in this role while also raising your families, and that's a project that I've undertaken for the last 3.5 months. And I wonder, how did you balance your public role and your responsibilities to the job with your family responsibilities? Sharon.
So when I ran for office the first time, it was 87. David was just going into college, so he was out of the nest. Karin was in high school, and I remember the year that I was running, she signed up actually to. She kind of looked ahead at, well, this is going to be a difficult period of time. Mom is going to be running for office, and I was going to be walking door to door. Somebody came to Robinson High School and was recruiting counselors for a camp that that was for people with developmental disabilities. And Karin was only 15 years old, and she came home and she says, "Mom, I'm going to sign up." And she went off to it was in so it was a camp in, where was it? I'm forgetting where it was, but it was like in the Shenandoah Mountains, and so she was in residence there. It was a tremendous maturing experience for Karin. So she went off as a little valley girl and came back as a really mature young lady who had been working with people with developmental disabilities. I guess it's a journey for the whole family when you're in government, when you're in politics. It's not easy to balance your personal life and your family life with something as demanding as local government. It can take all of your time. Karin, I made time for Karin. She actually loved the fact that I was, both David and Karin loved the fact that I was in local government. They thought it was really interesting. And so it seemed to not be a problem. It's important that you look out for your spouse. And I always make sure.
Especially because she's probably the only person that's going to watch this podcast or listen to this podcast. She's our one viewer, I hope, so I got to be nice to her.
Right.
Maybe Lou will watch.
I always made sure with Lou that Friday night was date night, and I kept that sacred. So people tried to invite me to things on a Friday night, and that was his night. So you need to make time for your spouse and for your family. Not always easy, but if you kind of engage, your family in what you're doing, I think David, my son, and Gretchen, my daughter-in-law, have done that beautifully with their kids. So David is in the General Assembly, and when they go to events and things, the kids come, and they've been part of the deal,
So
and
they don't feel like it's taking that away because
it's part of their life.
Yeah. John.
Yeah, I think the short answer to how did you do the balance, how did I do the balance, is probably poorly. Is probably the accurate answer. It is hard, and I had grown up in a political house, so I knew that aspect of being a child and having my father out in politics. So I was trying to balance some of those things that I felt could have been done better back then. But it is a challenge, and I had law practice too, so I really had this triple balancing act, which was insane. It's like juggling. When you juggle, you have two hands, but you have three bowling pins, and one always has to be in the air, right? Because you can only grab two, and so you just have to make sure you get used to things in the air. And it's challenging. I think it's doable, but it's hard, and it is impactful and on your family. I tried to keep Sundays as my family day, and for the most part, I could do that. I went to very few events on Sundays, except election years. I had to knock doors, and so that was hard. But also, I would try to get home for dinner. The Braddock office is only a mile from my house, and so I could swing home, grab dinner, be home for 45 minutes, at least have some interaction before going out to a meeting, and that made a big difference, because if I wasn't getting home till 10 o'clock every night, I think that would have been even more harder. But it's challenging, and my kids, had different reactions. One of my daughters used to like to come to Braddock Nights and get up on stage and pull the tickets out when she was younger, and enjoyed that. I think some of my other kids not so much. But one of my boys, when he was 4 or 5 years old, he said to me one day, he said, "Dad, I know you're a very important person. I don't really know why, but I just know you are." And I think we had been out at something, and people were, and he could just sense that. People kept coming up to me and talking, and that was kind of a neat moment to realize that, your kids could recognize you were trying to do something positive, for the community at large, and that message, you can't teach that message by lecturing to your kids or anybody else, right? You have to do it by example. And so, I hope that even though it's a challenge, I hope that idea of seeing that it's important to engage in your community and that there are a lot of rewards. It's a very rewarding job to do what we did. I hope that lesson will help all my kids. But it's not easy, and you'll struggle with it.
All right. Well, thank you both for that. So we are out of time, but we'll do two quick rapid fire questions here. We'll start with you, John. Favorite park in the Braddock District? Lake Accotink we're not going to do Lake Accotink because we know that's the best, and your favorite hidden gem of the Braddock District. Could be a park, could be a restaurant, could be a great spot. Park and hidden gem.
Well, the park, only because I'm there almost every day, is Kings Park. We're a block away, and so I've got a son who shoots baskets every day. We can play tennis. The field is there. These neighborhood parks really are gems, and we make good use of ours. Probably the district gem, and I don't go there, but Sharon would know this better than me. It's the Wakefield Chapel, because your office used to be up there. It's a really, I think it's underutilized, and people don't know that it's there, but it's a beautiful little church, and I've only been there a couple times. But if you ever have a chance to just, on a Sunday afternoon, of course, I don't know when it's open, but and I think there are some weddings in there and good times, but it's a beautiful sort of throwback to a different day, and I think that's maybe the prettiest spot in the district.
Yeah,
outside of Lake Accotink.
Yeah, that is a great one, and I can remember there was one afternoon when I was knocking on doors, and it was just about sunset when I was there, kind of looking over the chapel square, the soccer field in front of the chapel, and that's probably the best, other than Lake Accotink, the best sunset in the Braddock District. So a Sunday afternoon sunset is a great time to be there. Sharon, favorite park and favorite hidden gem?
So favorite park, so I can't say Accotink.
Can't say
But I
Accotink.
would say Accotink. I would say Royal Lake Park. It's that's where my family lived and my kids grew up, and I used to jog around Royal Lake. It's just beautiful.
Fingers crossed we'll be back there for Braddock Nights next
That
year.
will
I
be
hope.
fantastic.
Certainly
Yes,
anticipate,
Braddock
yeah.
Nights. And I'm so glad that John continued, that program, and that you'll be continuing
Absolutely.
that program. Hidden Gem. So now I run on little country roads that are near where I live. But sometimes I'll dip down into Villa Park. Villa Park is a hidden gem. It is. I remember somebody once wrote, "Well, there isn't anything here," which is why it's a hidden gem. When you go into that park, there mainly are just trails, and so there's no playgrounds or anything like that. You feel like you're off in the Shenandoah Mountains. It's just beautiful. It's peaceful. You can hear woodpeckers. There's old growth trees back there, and there are ancient quarries that are old soapstone quarries that Native Americans used to quarry for soapstone, and then also for some quartz. And nobody, I shouldn't actually talk about it because then people will know what they're seeing. And, but it probably is 3,000, 5,000 years old. And when I walk or jog on those trails and pass those quarries, you kind of have to know what you're looking for, because otherwise you would just pass by. It just looks like a little bit of a depression. And I imagine what the world was like when Native Americans populated Fairfax County. And I just think that's fascinating. So it's a beautiful hidden little gem.
Okay, two great hidden gems. Well, that went better than I even thought it would. Wakefield Chapel and Villa Park. So we have reached the end of the program. I want to thank. We had two amazing guests here: former Annandale Braddock Supervisor and Chairman of the Board of Supervisors, Sharon Bulova; former Braddock District Supervisor, John Cook. I think we might have peaked too soon with this Braddock Voices podcast. I don't know that we will have a better episode than this, but we will do our best for the next episode. And if you want to find out about that, you can email us at braddock@fairfaxcounty.gov to sign up for updates. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Have a great evening.